I never thought about Hull until I was here. Having got here, it suits me in many ways. It is a little on the edge of things. I think even its natives would say that. I rather like being on the edge of things. One doesn't really go anywhere by design, you know. You put in for jobs and move about, you know. I've lived in other places, born in Coventry.
Swerving east from rich industrial shadows and traffic all night north, swerving through fields too thin and thistled to be called meadows, and now and then a harsh-named halt that shields workmen at dawn, swerving to solitude of skies and scarecrows, haystacks, hares and pheasants, and the widening river's slow presence, the piled gold clouds, the shining gull-marked mud, gathers to the surprise of a large town. Here domes and statues, spires and cranes cluster beside grain-scattered streets, barge-crowded water, and residents from raw estates brought down the dead straight miles by stealing flat-faced trolleys, push through plate-glass swing doors to their desires. Cheap suits, red kitchenware, sharp shoes, iced lollies, electric mixers, toasters, washers, dryers. A cut-price crowd, urban yet simple, dwelling where only salesmen and relations come, within a terminate and fishy-smelling pastoral of ships up streets, the slave museum, tattoo shops, consulates, grim, headscarfed wives, and out beyond its mortgaged, half-built edges, fast-shadowed wheat fields, running high as hedges, isolate villages, where removed lives loneliness clarifies. Here silence stands like heat. Here leaves unnoticed thicken. Hidden weeds flower. Neglected waters quicken. Luminously peopled air ascends. And past the poppy's bluish neutral distance ends the land suddenly, beyond a beach of shapes and shingle. Here is unfenced existence, facing the sun, untalkative, out of reach. Here silence stands like heat. And here I'm standing on the coast of Lincolnshire, Tennyson's county, where everything's three-quarters sky, and which he writes about in his long rolling lines, Tennyson's county. And across there, over the estuary of the Humber, is Yorkshire, and you can just see Hull, where Philip Larkin lives, who wrote that poetry. It's a place of thunder, clouds, dark red brick Georgian streets where they survive, and steeples and domes. And beyond Hull, there's the North Sea. If anywhere's the end of England and the end of land, it's Hull and beyond Hull. The history that leads up to Philip Larkin's Hull is really fascinating. And then, for our own civilization, you get chain stores and new estates and new, flimsy, packaged architecture for the housewife. Nothing like the old Hull. And it's the combination of them both that Philip Larkin gets into his poems. The large, cool store selling cheap clothes, set out in simple sizes, plainly, knitwear, summer casuals, hose, in browns and greys, maroon and navy, conjures the weekday world of those who leave at dawn low terraced houses timed for factory, yard and site. But past the heaps of shirts and trousers spread the stands of modes for night, machine embroidered, thin as blouses, lemon, sapphire, moss green, rose, bry nylon, baby dolls and shorties flounce in clusters. To suppose they share that world, to think their sort is matched by something in it, shows how separate and unearthly love is, or women are, or what they do, or in our young, unreal wishes seem to be, synthetic, new, and natureless in ecstasies.
Taking it all in all, work and I get on fairly well, I think. There are just these occasions when one would like to prove it by not working for a bit, you know? And to feel that you're spending your life on the one rather than the other, I think, is perhaps the most depressing thought that work can bring you. When I bind up the library committee minutes at the end of 5 years, it makes a great fat volume. But it's not the same as a volume of poetry. They're very good minutes, but the minute as an art form has its limitations. When getting my nose in a book cured most things short of school, it was worth ruining my eyes to know I could still keep cool and deal out the old right hook to dirty dogs twice my size. Later, with inch-thick specs, evil was just my lark. Me and my cloak and fangs had ripping times in the dark. The women I clubbed with sex, I broke them up like meringues. Don't read much now. The dude who lets the girl down before the hero arrives, the chap who's yellow and keeps the store, seem far too familiar. Get stewed. Books are a load of crap.
I envy you, you know, very much, being a librarian. I think it'd be a marvellous thing to have a job to fall back on.
It forces you to think about something other than yourself, something other than your own poems, and that is positively good for you, I think, even as a poet. And secondly, of course, and the whole business releases you from that awful pressure that I imagine you must feel sometimes of just having to write something to carry on living.
My goodness, it is a pressure. And one of the most unpleasant things about it is one puts everything one's got into writing a poem, and then you get knocked by the Friday Pharisee or the Sunday prig, and I'm ill for weeks after it. I mind so much, and I'm always expected to be something I'm not, or not as good as I was before. What sort of attitude do you take to adverse criticism?
Well, I don't know if you feel this, but I feel it very strongly. I read that, you know, I'm a miserable sort of fellow writing a kind of welfare state sub-poetry. Doing it well, perhaps, but it isn't really what poetry is, and it isn't really the sort of poetry we want. But I wonder whether it ever occurs to the writer of criticism like that really one agrees with them. But what one writes is based so much on the kind of person one is and the kind of environment one's had and has now that one doesn't really choose the poetry one writes. One writes the kind of poetry one has to write or can write.
That's what I think so marvellous about your poetry. It exactly describes the surroundings in which you live and the feelings of a detached observer, and it's easily understood by everyone. Those great strolling lines, I mean, when I look outside there and I see from this flat that dusty sycamore and those burnt out chestnut candles sheltering the public park below us, I think of your poem Toads Revisited.
And well you may. Walking around in the park should feel better than work. The lake, the sunshine, the grass to lie on, blurred playground noises beyond black-stockinged nurses, not a bad place to be. Yet it doesn't suit me, being one of the men you meet of an afternoon, palsied old step-takers, hair-eyed clerks with the jitters, wax-fleshed-out patients, still vague from accidents, and characters in long coats deep in the litter baskets, all dodging the toad work by being stupid or weak. Think of being them, hearing the hours chime, watching the bread delivered, the sun by clouds covered, the children going home. Think of being them, turning over their failures by some bed of lobelias, nowhere to go but indoors, no friends but empty chairs. No, give me my in tray, my loaf-haired secretary, my "Shall I keep the call in, sir?" What else can I answer when the lights come on at 4 at the end of another year? Give me your arm, old toad. Help me down Cemetery Road.
I can absolutely understand your coming into this cemetery, Philip, because it's a bit of wild country in the middle of Hull with most splendid exotic trees and winding walks. And these tombstones everywhere, I suppose, represent deathbeds in the 40s and 50s of the last century of rich Hull merchants in big Italianate houses in Pearson Park, where you are.
Yes, and the avenues off Pearson Park.
That was the classy part of Hull, and this was the smart cemetery where people came on a Sunday, I suppose, with their families. I notice that it's become derelict now. Saplings of sycamore, nettles, elder, in among the tombstones. So I'd rather it like this than all that neat, ordered sort of housing estate of the new cemetery.
I find that when I come here on a wet Sunday afternoon in December or something like that, when it isn't at all romantic, it gets me into perspective, it gets my worries into perspective, and everything I write, I think, has the consciousness of approaching death in the background.
You get it beautifully in your poem about ambulances, that line, "In time all streets are visited," and I remember the 4 lines in it. "And sense the solving emptiness that lies just under all we do, and for a second get it whole, so permanent and black and true." Did you find, when you started writing, if you look back at it now, it's the most awful tripe?
Most awful tripe, yes. You were writing very well at the university. I was ploughing on with a kind of Yeats and water until I was about 26 or 7. I was looking at some of it the other day, and it astonished me. It's not so much that it's bad, but it was so unreal and without any possible reference to my own life as I was living it.
The first poem of yours I recall is Church-Going.
Yes, I didn't think it was terribly successful. At that time, I'd rather formed the habit of going out cycling on Sundays, partly for exercise, partly because I hadn't got anything else to do. And whenever I saw a church, I used to stop and look inside. It was a nice excuse for stopping, but I liked going into them. I know very little about them, but I always welcomed the feeling I had going into a church, and in the end, I began to try to write about it.
Once I'm sure there's nothing going on, I step inside. letting the door thud shut. Another church. Matting, seats and stone and little books, sprawlings of flowers cut for Sunday, brownish now, some brass and stuff up at the holy end, the small neat organ, and a tense, musty, unignorable silence, brewed God knows how long. Hatless, I take off my cycle clips in awkward reverence, move forward, run my hand around the font. From where I stand, the roof looks almost new, cleaned or restored. Someone would know, I don't. Mounting the lectern, I peruse a few hectoring large-scale verses and pronounce, "Here endeth," much more loudly than I'd meant. The echoes snigger briefly. Back at the door, I sign the book, donate an Irish sixpence, reflect the place was not worth stopping for. Yet stop I did. In fact, I often do, and always end, much at a loss like this, wondering what to look for. Wondering, too, when churches fall completely out of use, what we shall turn them into, if we shall keep a few cathedrals chronically on show, their parchment, plate and pyx in locked cases, and let the rest rent-free to rain and sheep. Shall we avoid them as unlucky places? Or, after dark, will dubious women come to make their children touch a particular stone, pick simples for a cancer, or on some advised night see walking a dead one? Power of some sort or other will go on in games, in riddles, seemingly at random, but superstition, like belief, must die, and what remains when disbelief has gone? Grass, weedy pavement, brambles, buttress, sky, a shape less recognizable each week, a purpose more obscure. I wonder who will be the last, the very last, to seek this place for what it was. One of the crew that tap and jot, and know what rood lofts were? Some ruin bibber, randy for antique, or Christmas addict, counting on a whiff of gown and bands and organ pipes and myrrh? Or will he be my representative, bored, uninformed, knowing the ghostly silt dispersed, yet tending to this cross of ground through suburb scrub, because it held unspilt so long and equably what since is found only in separation, marriage and birth and death and thoughts of these, for whom was built this special shell. For though I've no idea what this accoutred, frowsty barn is worth, it pleases me to stand in silence here. A serious house on serious earth it is, in whose blent air all our compulsions meet, are recognized and robed as destinies. And that much never can be obsolete, since someone will forever be surprising a hunger in himself to be more serious, and gravitating with it to this ground which, he once heard, was proper to grow wise in, if only that so many dead lie round.
I like to be a little to one side of the metropolitan scene. You know, I don't think I should be very happy in London. Longest I've ever been in London is 2 weeks when I was in hospital there, and that was grueling enough.
You get some very fine effects of light, particularly in the evenings when you have the sunsets building up westwards down the river. You get magnificent pilings up of cloud, all golden and rosy and so forth. That again is not the sort of thing you'd see in the average mid-England provincial town, and that's the sort of reason that I like being in Hull.
And your poem here, you know, gives that, where you get that sense of there being limitlessness beyond Hull and then eternity. I read it to some Hull people last night, and tears came to their eyes. They thought it was so good. They said, we must know this man. Can't he come and see us?
It's another evening gone.
Beyond all this, the wish to be alone. However the sky grows dark with invitation cards, however we follow the printed directions of sex, however the family is photographed under the flagstaff, beyond all this, the wish to be alone. Beneath it all, desire of oblivion runs, despite the artful tensions of the calendar, the life insurance, the tabled fertility rites, the costly aversion of the eyes from death. Beneath it all, desire of oblivion runs.